This is the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, and we're back. You can listen to the Rich Dad Radio Show anytime, anywhere on Android, iTunes, and YouTube. And then when you do, please leave a review of whatever you listen to. Did you like it? Did you hate it? What you missed? What should we have done better? And all of our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. We archive them for one reason, is because we're not financial advisors. We do not tell you to invest for the long term in a well-diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and ETFs. We don't do that stuff. But we do want to advise people what we do, what's different than all this. So if you listen to this program again, because we're an education company only, you'll pick up 10 more distinctions that you missed the first time you listened to. And the second reason we archive at richdadradio.com this podcast and all podcasts, especially if we have friends, family members, and business associates, and that idiot brother-in-law of yours, they should listen to this. Because our guest today is a very, very important guest. His name is Paul Pagnato, and he's talking about what's really going on under the sheets at Wall Street and why he was named Barron's top financial advisor and Forbes' top wealth advisor in one of the most corrupt industries other than pharmaceuticals in the world. So did you get named Barron's top financial advisor and Forbes' top wealth advisor after the transformation or before?
Correct.
After.
That is after. And when I had walked, this was 8 years ago when I had walked away from everything. I was overseeing about $1 billion in assets, and now we have quadrupled that. We have $4 billion in assets that we advise on. And what I've found is not just through my personal experience, but when you study the companies that are leading the markets, companies that are breaking out, companies that have the strongest trust and brand recognition, these are all companies that have taken transparency to a whole new level in their industry.
And what are some examples of some of those companies, Paul?
So Uber is an example. So you think about it. Before Uber, you ordered a cab. You didn't know exactly what the price was going to be. You didn't know where they were. You didn't know who the driver was. You didn't know what kind of car was going to pick you up. You did not have transparency in all of that. Today, you do, right at your fingertips. Apple is doing an amazing job with privacy standards. Tim Cook has really put his companies out. You can Google Apple privacy standards, and they list them all. Whereas some of the other technology companies, as we know, haven't done that.
Like Facebook, that's why they're in trouble, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. Like Facebook. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg had to testify before Congress that their algorithms weren't completely transparent. Now, the positive is that he had to testify before Congress, and the positive is they're changing, and there's becoming a lot more transparency around these sophisticated algorithms. So these companies that are growing exponentially, and I believe will continue to lead this decade, have this DNA of transparency, and they have these traits. I label them the 6 T's of transparency. And if a company or a department within a company, or an entrepreneur follows these 6 T's, and they're not that complicated, you'll become exponentially transparent.
So
and
can
you'll
you
have
give us
unbelievable trust.
So can you give us one of the T's?
You bet. Terms. So if a client has very complicated terms or contract with the public or with their clients, you lose trust. The simpler, the easier the terms are, the more trust that you have. So it's actually, you want to make it ridiculously simple. Right? If you have to read 5 pages of legalese that you cannot understand, that should be a red flag that something's going on behind the scenes. It shouldn't be that way. So these companies have simplistic terms. They also have transparent cost. So most of these companies you can Google and you can find out exactly what the cost is for their product or service. When somebody hems and haws and it's all complicated or there's complicated formula as to what the cost is with something, that's usually a red flag. So there's these 6 T's that can be used and followed as guidelines, guardrails to help any company, any entrepreneur, any person working within a company, with their department, to transform the culture to transparency.
And one of your T's, which I think is one of the most important, is trust. And from personal experience, we've dealt with a lot of people who we didn't trust, and that wreaked havoc everywhere. So actually, our policy is we really pretty much only deal with people who we trust. How does that play out in your world?
So trust is the pinnacle of the other 5 T's. So once you follow those 5 T's, you do have trust. And I'll give you an example of that. Jack Bogle was the founder of Vanguard. He was the first one to create a completely transparent, low-cost mutual fund, which now led into the whole ETF industry. Today, there are more in assets under management at Vanguard than J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Merrill Lynch combined. It's just staggering. So Jack took transparency to the mutual fund space to a whole new level. And look what's happened. There's unbelievable trust.
But wasn't it also because I'm not in the paper asset, I'm not in your world. But the way I understood it with Vanguard and all that, wasn't a lot because you had lower fees, ETFs?
Yes.
But that wasn't the only reason?
Yes, you had total transparency on what the cost is, and he brought the cost down. You had total transparency of what's being owned, so there's no manipulation. So the terms were very, very simple. There was total accountability. So because it's in the prospectus, they file with the SEC, this is exactly what they're going to do. These are the companies. This is the discipline. They have complete transparency, very simple terms, low cost. And
so
look what's happened.
Let me ask you a question. So give me the bad side of it. What were the other guys doing? You can name those scumbags if you want, but and they're probably still doing it, because I was just in New York and talking to the Wall Street Journal reporter, and she has no trust of your industry. I said, how many people in the money management world are honest? She says less than 10%.
Unfortunately, I have to concur with that. The pure fact that there's less than 1% of the industry, of the companies or the advisors that follow these 10, we call it true fiduciary, these 10 true fiduciary standards, which strip out the conflicts of interest.
I understand, but
sums that up.
Give us a bad example. It's really nice to talk about heaven, but I want to find out what hell sounds like.
Well, let's talk about a bad example that everyone knows about at a high level, and I'll drill down and provide more transparency and clarity. Bernie Madoff. See, Bernie Madoff did what he did for 20 years.
But didn't he have the perfect name? I mean, shouldn't people have warned? If you had a name like Madoff, or how about if it was F.U.? He goes, well, I better not work with a guy named F.U. You know what I mean? Madoff, he was telling you. Everybody should have known.
And he still got away with it. Well, the crazy thing is, he never got caught.
I know.
He never got caught. After 20 years, he had to turn himself in.
How did he get away with it?
Well, this is what's important for the listeners to understand. He got away with it because the things he did, which I'll walk through right now, were legal. Like, he was able to do those things, and I'll explain how. But they haven't changed the laws. All those things are still legal today. So when he was audited, Bernie Madoff was able to be the advisor and also collect the money. So people wrote checks to him. That's a conflict of interest. Bernie Madoff was able to be the advisor and obtain commissions for the money. Bernie Madoff, and that's allowed today, Bernie Madoff was allowed to be the advisor and also generate the client statements.
And he
fraudulently did.
And that's when that guy, what was his name? The whistleblower who never made any money, Markop or something? The guy that blew the whistle.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
But
But how he caught, everybody should know this.
Yeah.
The reason they caught him was because his returns were a straight line that kept going up. And that should tell you something. You know, those are red flags.
Right.
That's what I want to get at, because otherwise we're going to stay in theory, Paul. And we at Rich Dad like to get down to the dirt. The dirt is a lot more fun. So when we come back, I have to take a break, and when we come back with Paul, I want a little bit more dirt rather than happy camp here. We'll be right back.
So we were talking, Paul, about Bernie Madoff and how Bernie Madoff got away with what he got away with, and you said because everything he was doing was legal, not ethical, but legal. Tell us more.
That's correct. Yeah, so the regulators haven't changed the laws. The regulators still allow an advisor to calculate their performance returns for their clients and generate client statements and receive commissions and all these items. So it's up to you. So it's up to you as an investor to not allow that. And you vote with your pocketbook. We can't rely and count on the regulators to protect against those things. So it's up to you. You vote with your pocketbook. And if you don't place your money with an institution or with an advisor that's not, we call it true fiduciary, you'll change the system, because they will be forced
how does the average
change.
person, Paul, please, man, how does the average person know? I mean, Madoff was part of the NASDAQ or something like that. He was really a highly respected individual. But the thing that cued, I think it's Markopoulos or something like that, was that his line went straight up. Now, everybody can see that, but the average guy cannot see that. Most markets go up and down, and all. Madoff is going straight up. But, to say, you please give us more examples. Exactly how are they doing it today? Because we don't know.
You're right. The average person, it's very, very difficult to follow because they make it complicated. So, number one, if it's too complicated and you can't follow what your advisor's telling you, that should be a red flag. Like, stop. That's a red flag. So it should be very, very simple. The terms should be very, very simple. You should know exactly how your advisor and that advisor's firm is making their money. There should only be one, this is how simple it is. There should only be one source of revenue. It should be the fees you're paying your advisor. That's it, period. End of discussion. If they're receiving compensation in any other shape or form outside of the fee you're paying for advice, there's conflicts. So that's one way to think about it and to drill down and look. So you just ask your advisor how they're paid, what are the sources of revenue. Do not accept anything other. And there are thousands and thousands of advisors that you can hire and enter a relationship where you're just paying them for the advice.
I understand, Paul, but the transparency the corruption takes place after the advisor. Like I said, I was just on Wall Street last week, and the corruption that goes on after the money is corrupted, like, what do they do with that money? Where does it go to? Where, who gets the money after the money is collected? Follow the money.
Yep.
How does the average person do that?
Yep. Well, what is happening is you see a massive shift occurring to fintech, the financial technology companies. It could be in a company like Venmo, right? There's no cost for me to transfer money to you through Venmo. That's an example. There are robo-advisors that are much purer, much cleaner. I'm not saying there's still not some issues there, but they're much, much, much better. And then there are lenders, fintech lenders, that are much, much better. In the last 7 years, personal loans were only 5% in fintech online. Today, in 7 years, it's now over 40%. The digital advisors have grown 80% last year. So digital advice is growing exponentially.
And why is digital
Why
is digital advice better than a human advice?
The consumers like it better because they feel there is a higher level of trust, because you have more transparency, you have simpler terms, You can see everything 24/7. It's very, very automated, and that is extremely appealing to the generation coming up. So that's why you see literally there's over $1 trillion in assets there, and in the next 2-3 years there'll be another $1 trillion of assets. So this is where things are headed, and that is a positive. It is not a negative, because the more things are digitized, the more transparency you have, and the opaqueness gets pulled out of it. So this is where the assets are flowing. This is where people are looking for solutions and obtaining solutions more and more. Now, what we do with our company, where we feel the best of all worlds, is a combination of both, where you're using digital tools and technology to have really simple terms. You're only paying a fee for the advice. You can see everything. You have full transparency 24/7. But then you also have a person, a human being to talk to when you want to talk to somebody. Because, we all go through difficult times and we have difficult situations that we deal with from time to time, and it's nice to speak to a human being. So I think the best of all worlds is to have high touch, but also high tech, a combination of both.
So let's talk for a minute about Wall Street, because Wall Street is pretty corrupt. Yes, it's pretty corrupt. It
has a track record of being very corrupt.
Yeah. So how does the transparency? How do you affect Wall Street when it's such a huge monster, and they're all about fees, and they're all about greed, and they're all about taking as much money as they can and screwing everybody else?
Yeah. So you have the arrangements with Wall Street to be project-based, fee-based versus commission-based. Commissions immediately trigger conflicts and bad behavior, not necessarily in the best interest of the consumer. 2, more and more digitization. So, I was, and it's happening. I was on Wall Street. I was there on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. There's really not a whole lot going on. It's all become digitized. And digitization is getting cleaner and cleaner. It's not perfect. We're in this process, and that's why I wrote the book, The Transparency Wave. So it's underway, but it's still going to take time. There's still issues to get worked out. But the more it's digitized, the less opaqueness, the less places people have to manipulate the system.
But isn't that kind of what
all documented? Go ahead.
Right. So isn't that what gives Bitcoin its power? It's called blockchain underneath of it.
Blockchain is here. It's here to stay.
But isn't that beautiful? Isn't that you're saying the same thing when it comes to money? That's what I'm just trying to get to speak the layman's language to understand, because I understand what you're saying, Paul, but you're not making much sense to me right now. So when you talk about digitized, are you talking about you have Bitcoin, but what gives Bitcoin power is blockchain, because it's basically everything is there recorded for posterity, everybody to see, and not one individual can manipulate it. Is that what you're saying when you call it digitized?
Yes, that is what I'm saying. So when a financial transaction is digitized, there is a permanent record that is stored, and you have full transparency, and everybody can see it.
So, Paul, what happens? What happens after Paul? What happens after you transfer your money? How do you follow the money after that? That's my question.
So you should always be able to see and view your assets. So if you purchase security or you transfer money from point A to point B, you should always be able to see it.
Okay.
So the technology and the tools are in place for an individual to always be able to see and view the movement of the money.
Well, Paul, thank you very much. Thanks for writing your book, Transparency Wave: Exponential Changes That Will Transform Our World. We're there. We're going into the digitized world. It's the invisible world, but there's more tools coming up that will make things more apparent for other people to make better decisions of who you trust your money to. And personally, right now, I don't trust anybody on Wall Street.
And transparency changes everything.
Right. All right, so thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Paul. Thank you for your work.
Good
We'll
luck
look
to you.
forward to your book.
Well, thank you for your time. Much appreciated. Thanks for pushing me there, Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Hello, Robert Kiyosaki, back with the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. Once again, listen to the Rich Dad Radio program anytime, anywhere on iTunes, Android, and YouTube now. And leave us a comment or a review whenever you listen to this program. We'd like to hear from you. What did you want to hear? What did you not hear? What can we do better? Also, all of our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. We archive them because we're not a financial advisor. You know, we are a financial education company. So if you listen to this program one more time, your comprehension of what was said will double. I promise you that, because repetition is how we learn. But more importantly, get your friends, family, and business associates to listen to this program, especially if they have what's called a 401k, or they have a pension with the state, or they're giving their money to Wall Street, because that's where the money disappears. So I want to thank our guest today, Paul Pagnato. He was named Barron's top financial advisor and Forbes top wealth advisor. And, you know, to do that, you got to be pretty good. And he's coming out with his latest book, Transparency Wave, Exponential Changes That Will Transform Our World. And he was talking about how he was transformed after he found out how Wall Street was screwing their clients. And he mentioned Bernie Madoff. And I keep saying, you should have listened to his name, Madoff. He's telling you something. Any comments, Kim?
Yeah, well, I mean, I like the book Transparency Wave. I like the title. I mean, we know from personal experience, the more transparent we are just as a company, the better off we are. And when I get in trouble, is times where I try to hide things, shovel them under the table or something like that. So the whole concept of transparency and being forthright and honest with numbers and things like that, I think is very, very important. The key is in your investments and Wall Street and your stocks, how do you as an individual uncover the facts and the transparency? I mean, it's pretty well layered and hidden.
So let me be so blatant and shamelessly publish or promote my latest book called Who Stole My Pension? And it's out now and is with Edward Ted Siddell. And the reason that's important is because I just came off of Wall Street last week, and now I'm talking to Paul. And I don't think he knows. He said, well, it's good, you know, your robo-advisor or whatever they're talking about now. Oh, yeah, we have good records of your money right now. That's not the problem, sports fans. That they have good records of your money being deposited is not the problem. Like I said, we just wrote this book called Who Stole My Pension with Edward Ted Siddell. And Ted Siddell is an SEC attorney, and he stopped being an SEC attorney, much like Paul Pagnato, when he saw what was happening with your money after it was deposited. See, look, it's not a matter of you having good records and simple contracts. It's que pasa, as my friends would say in Spanish-speaking countries. What did they do with the money? And the story of who stole my pension, I was on Wall Street last week with Ted, and I tell you, it made me angry. I mean, it's a great book, Who Stole My Pension, but hanging out with Ted, I found out how pervasive, how damaging, and how at risk people are, because Paul is correct. Nothing has changed. They're still stealing your money. And most people have money in Wall Street for one primary reason, their pension. And listen to this. This is my prediction. For 2020 and on, next 10 years, pensions are going to be the biggest story we hear. Because the old guys like me are out of time. We cannot save anymore. If they steal any more of it, you know, they're going to be moving in with their kids, or the kids are going to be moving with them because they got student loan debt. We've been all ripped off here. Everybody's ripping everybody off right now. So I was just on Wall Street with Ted, so listening to Paul, I'm going, holy mackerel. The problem is not that they keep good records. The problem is what do they do with the money after they deposit it? Any comments,
Well, even to Ted's point, that's why he left, is because here he was managing people's money. He felt responsible for these people's money who worked. Paul, excuse me. Yeah. So Paul was managing all this money of his clients, and he wanted to do right by them. But even after his clients had deposited all of their money with Paul and Paul's firm, there was still that temptation. This bank calls and says, put all your clients into our bonds so you can save our bank. well, if Paul didn't have the integrity to say no, most will say yes. And so just to your point, Robert, once they deposit that money with these investment banks and investment advisors, who knows where it goes and what that game is? I certainly don't.
What I got Paul to try and say is that if he had moved that money and all the money disappeared, it's still within the law.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're doing it every day.
They can lose billions and it's still within the law, and they're protected. I wish you had said that. Like I said, just last week, I'm sitting on Wall Street talking to the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Barron's and Bloomberg reporters. And I asked a Wall Street Journal reporter, I said, what % of the people on Wall Street are honest? She said less than 10%. She says they're all out to take your money. And it just made me sick. So the book is called Who Stole My Pension? You should read in there about how, because Ted Siddell, is a guy who writes about how your pensions are stolen. If you have a defined benefit pension plan, I'm more into the 401k side, defined contribution side. But ladies and gentlemen, when you turn your money over to these financial advisors, I don't care if they're robo or not robo, they're going to steal your money. Their whole job is to steal your money. And if you don't know anything about it, then you can trust Paul and say, well, just find a good guy and all this stuff. The whole job was to steal your money. So the question is, once you put your money in there, even though the guy is honest, let's say Paul is honest, what does his company do with that money? And that's what we cover in Who Stole My Pension. It goes from the public banking market to the private banking system. It's called a shadow banking system. And I don't know if you've been following this right now, but the biggest crash just occurred a few weeks ago. It's called the repo market, the repurchase market. They're bankrupt. Right now, in the last 6 months, the U.S. Federal Reserve has put $3 trillion into the repo market because the money is gone. They're trying to keep this thing afloat right now. So the book is called Who Stole My Pension, and that's what I write about. So I'm glad Paul is talking about being transparent with your broker, but your broker, as we say at Rich Dad, is broker than you because he's stealing your money for Wall Street.
And it's exactly why we started the Rich Dad Company, is because people blindly turn their money over and expecting some financial advisor to manage their money better than they can. And it's like our friend who's a politician, and he's not really a politician because he's fighting for people. But he said, if any politician, including myself, tells you that they're doing this in your best interest, just know they're lying. And I think that's Wall Street. They're not doing anything in their best interest. They're doing it in the best interest of Wall Street. So again, we have Rich Dad Company because you've got to be responsible for your money and not turn it blindly over to Wall Street and other people to steal.
So if you're a millennial, just know they already stole your money through this thing called student loans. Student loan debt is now bigger than the subprime mortgage debt, which nearly brought down the world in 2008.
It's handcuffed our youth.
It's they're screwing you.
Yep.
Oh, go to school. We'll give you a loan. And like a little robot, you just go in there and you learn nothing about money.
So the New York Times the other day came out with there's little snippets of people that they talk to on the street and how much debt do you have? Bad debt. How much bad debt do you have? Most of them was student loan debt. And 3 out of 10 said, well, the problem is we're not taught anything about money and we don't know what to do. So we get out of school and now we have this noose around our neck and we can barely breathe because we can't pay it off and we can't get a job.
So please listen. The book is called Who Stole My Pension with Ted Siddell. The reason there's 2 authors, Ted and myself, is 2 kinds of pensions. Defined benefit, which is teachers, firefighters, police officers, and labor union guys. There's one guy in the book, he's a retired Teamster. You don't mess with Teamsters. They drive trucks. And his pension, he worked for, and I will mention the name, it's called UPS. They stole his pension. So he was getting $4,000 a month as a pensioner, and he says it's now $800 a month. They said, congratulations, you just lost 3/4 of your pension. Wow. And the rioting in Paris, France right now, as we're talking, is because of pensions. Japan is toast. They've stolen all their money out of their pensions. And so I'm really happy for Paul. It's happy camp. He thinks the broker is on their side. The broker is just the first. It's like talking to the teller at the bank, but the bank robbery is going on inside the vault. If you can get that picture, ladies and gentlemen, you'll know why the Rich Dad Company is in existence today. You got to find out what's going on inside the vault. So like last week, I'm sitting on Wall Street listening to Ted Siddell talk to some of the smartest, all women, by the way, women reporters. Man, they're deadly.
Doesn't surprise Sarah or myself.
They're deadly. I said to the Wall Street Journal reporter, I said, I'm just glad you're not investigating me because they're vicious. And then all of a sudden I realized why, because the guys hiding in the vault stealing the money are very smart. They have firewalls all over the place. You cannot touch them. So Paul Pagnato is correct. You know, they're doing everything. The guy taking your money is not the problem. It's like the teller's not the problem. It's the guy inside the vault. And that's the big difference here. Like, you know, inside who stole my pension, a lot of my friends are in there. You know, they're pilots for United Airlines. They got their money stolen out of their pension. I have pilots right now who are calling me up saying, you know, I'm still working. I can't fly anymore because I'm too old. But their pension was stolen. And so hear what I'm saying. Pensions will be the biggest story for this decade, 2020 to 2030, because they're all looted. Right now in Paris, they're rioting because they're going after their pensions. Our governments are broke. And who's going to pay for this pension mistake? Not Wall Street. The taxpayer will pay for it eventually. And the student loan debt is already a disaster. They're still stealing from you guys. So that's why the biggest mistake is to go to school and not learn anything about money. Final words, Kim.
No, just wrap it up.
Oh, that was a great way to end it.
So I want to hear from Sarah because she's a younger generation. She still has time. Sarah, what do you think about the old guys like me? You know, I mean, I'll turn 73 this year. I'm 1 over par on a golf course. So if I was broke right now, can I come live with you?
No.
What do you think about all this as a younger person?
I think nobody will understand. To be honest, this is a subject nobody talks about. I was glad we talked about Bernie Madoff in the to start it, because I think that's a story people understand. There's been movies about it. Yeah. But I think the grand scheme of things, people don't understand how big this is and how widespread this is. I was just reading something on Chicago's pension, you know, the city pensions for Chicago. And would you say that that's a form, you know, like the pensions, the money goes into mutual funds or whatever the city does with them, right? So who's in charge of that at that point?
But what happens after that?
Yeah,
that's
who's in charge of it?
No, please listen, okay? There's two types of finances. There's public and private. So the money goes into the public market, which is stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, what Paul sells. From there, it goes to private. It goes to private equity, hedge funds, and all that. Kim and I are private. Kim and I, Wall Street's both. Kim and I are private. In the trade, we're called a family office. We manage our own money. Mm-hmm. The average person doesn't have the education to do that.
Right.
So the average person, all they see is the broker, you know, Merrill Lynch or Goldman. I don't know who those guys are. Vanguard.
Wells Fargo.
Oh, that's who Ted's going. I shouldn't say that. Anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's why you listen to Rich Dad and Rich Dad Radio and all this, because even if you don't understand it, just hear me clearly. Because of a lack of financial education, somebody's got their money in your pocket, and that's not a mistake. Mm-hmm. The reason there's no financial education in schools is because the school system is just as corrupt. How in the world can they charge kids like $50,000 to go to school and not teach them anything about money? Those college professors should be locked up and sent off with Bernie Madoff. That's what's going on. Mm-hmm. So that's why the Rich Dad Company was formed, how many years ago now, Kim?
22 years ago.
And it's still going on. So anyway, Sarah, thanks for setting this program up. And everybody, please listen to this. Remember, who got their hand in your pocket? Thank you for listening.